You think royalty means ballrooms, diamonds, and fairy tales? Cute. Try corpses dragged across kingdoms, poisoned justice, inbreeding so extreme an entire dynasty face-planted into extinction, and kings who thought they were made of glass. If you've ever envied a crown, wait till you hear what it cost. Buckle up. 1. The king who ended a dynasty with his own blood. Charles II of Spain arrived at the throne as a medical checklist. The Habsburg jaw wasn't a meme, it was an inheritance. Severe mandibular prognathism, chewing problems, speech issues, frequent illness, developmental delays, infertility that became a national crisis with a crown attached. For generations, the Spanish Habsburgs had married cousins to keep the right blood in the right house. The family tree pinwheeled in on itself until it looked less like a tree and more like a wreath. Ministers blamed curses, priests blamed demons, physicians bled him, purged him, and burned herbs while whispering Latin. Nothing fixed a math problem written into his DNA. When Charles died in 1700 with no heir, Spain didn't just lose a king, it detonated Europe. The War of the Spanish Succession pulled in empires like a whirlpool. One royal skull shaped by inbreeding reshaped a continent. 2. The queen who wouldn't let the dead go. Joanna of Castile loved Philip the Handsome with a devotion the court called madness. The story goes like this. Philip dies. Joanna orders his coffin sealed, then unsealed, then sealed, then unsealed, kisses his feet, and drags him across winter roads under torchlight as if proximity could resurrect him. Did she do it every night? Probably not. Did she do it at least once? Sources suggest so. Did men with motives inflate the worst parts to sideline a woman who had a legal claim to rule? Also, yes. Madness was a convenient word when her father and later her son wanted to govern in her name. Picture it. A dark cart, a veiled queen, monks exchanging glances as a royal procession passes at midnight. Whether the macabre ritual happened once or often, the image stuck. A queen weaponized by grief or by propaganda. 3. Henry VIII and the court that reeked. We romanticize the Tudor glitter. We skip the Tudor smell. Henry VIII carried a leg wound that refused to heal. Ulcers that festered, leaked and stank. Courtiers smelled him before they saw him. Imagine trying to negotiate policy while the king shifts in pain, and a sweet sour rot hangs in the room. The body influenced the throne, irritability, sleeplessness, flashes of fury, the execution orders that read like thunderbolts, the wives who learned how quickly tenderness curdles when you can't give a man like that what he wants, a son, obedience, comfort. Behind portraits of velvet and pearls, there were poultices, pus, and a monarch whose moods could rewrite the law. 4. The Tsar who killed his future. Ivan IV. The Terrible built an empire with one hand and crushed it with the other. The famous scene. In a burst of rage, he strikes his son, also named Ivan, with a staff. The heir collapses. The father realizes what he's done too late, weeps, calls for help that can't help. One moment of violence turned succession into a cliff edge. After Ivan's death, Russia cascaded toward the time of troubles, famine, pretenders, foreign armies, a haunted throne. If you want to understand how a dynasty dies, watch the moment it kills itself. 5. The Mad King who was probably misdiagnosed. George III didn't just lose his mind. He lost control of the narrative. For centuries people said porphyria. Today many historians and clinicians think bipolar spectrum illness better matches the documented manic episodes, pressured speech, and cycles of lucidity. The image we inherit is of a king babbling nonsense while his doctors debate whether to bleed him or restrain him. But it's not just tragedy. There were stretches of normal governance, family life, and public duty. The frightening part is the unpredictability. One day the state runs. The next day the state waits. What do you do when the sovereign's brain is a storm? You invent regency, you rewrite procedure, you whisper. 6. The dynasty that married siblings on purpose. The Ptolemies of Egypt didn't flinch at incest. They filed it as policy. Cleopatra VII married her younger brothers in turn because legitimacy meant the throne was shared by siblings who, by design, produced more sibling spouses. This wasn't a scandal. It was a job description. Priests wrote hymns, courtiers bowed, and the genetic roll of the dice kept rolling. We spend so much time swooning over Cleopatra's charisma that we forget the system she was trapped inside. Love as strategy, marriage as mathematics, children as legal documents with tiny hands. 7. Nero, Sporus, and the Theatre of Control. The story reads like a nightmare. Nero has a youth named Sporus castrated, dresses him like the Empress Poppaea, and stages a wedding before the public. The ancient writers loved salacious detail, but multiple accounts converge on the same grotesque scene. Think about what it required. Officials who prepared the ceremony, guests who attended, a city forced to watch their emperor act out grief and desire by remaking a person into a prop. Rome called itself a republic in marble. Sometimes it was just one man's stage. 8. The emperor who trolled the Senate with a horse. Caligula and Incitatus, the world's most famous non-consul. No, he probably didn't actually make his horse a consul. He threatened to do it. He joked about it, which is the point. It wasn't policy, it was humiliation. This is power as performance art. You think you matter? He asked the Senate. I could seat a horse in your chair and Rome would still run. When a ruler turns government into a bit, the punchline lands on everyone else. 9. Bloody Mary's body betrayed her. Mary I of England needed an heir like she needed air. Twice her body said, "Good news." Her belly swelled. Court tailors adjusted gowns. Cradles were prepared. The bells were practically rehearsing. And then, nothing. Pseudocyesis. Phantom pregnancy. Imagine a queen walking through the nursery that won't be used while ambassadors send nervous letters home. Policy hardens. Religion becomes a cudgel. Personal hope turns into national pressure that congeals into cruelty. We talk about Bloody Mary's burnings. We talk less about a woman whose body raised a kingdom's hopes and then betrayed her on the public stage. 10. Rivers of mercury for an undead emperor. Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, didn't plan a tomb. He planned an underground empire. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury, crossbow traps, a starry ceiling, and palaces for eternity. We haven't opened the central chamber, but surveys around the mound show elevated mercury levels in the soil, modern science sniffing at an ancient rumour and finding metal in the dirt. Some rulers built mausoleums. He built a world. We stand outside it, guessing. 11. The king who turned a country into a company. Leopold II of Belgium didn't inherit the Congo Free State. He owned it. Privately. He called it civilization. The ledgers say rubber quotas, severed hands, hostages, mutilations, terror. The numbers will always be argued, because atrocity hides in bad paperwork. But even conservative estimates describe a catastrophe. Villages emptied, families broken, a human scream that echoes through photographs, boys staring into a basket where their father's hand should be attached to his arm. When the scandal finally exploded, Belgium took the Congo away from its king. Imagine the horror required to shame a monarchy into firing itself. 12. King Tut, the boy, the bones, the burden. Golden mask. Famous name. But under the gold, Tutankhamun carries the receipt for royal inbreeding. A narrow chest, clubfoot indicators, possible cleft palate traces, and a genetic profile that strongly suggests his parents were full siblings. He doesn't live long. He limps through a life that was designed for ceremony, not stress. Every court ritual, standing, kneeling, processing, costs more than it looks. We call him the Boy King. We forget the pain. When modern tests reached back across millennia, they didn't just decode a family, they underlined a lesson written in bone. Crowns are expensive in ways money can't cover. They cost bodies, bloodlines, minds, and the truth. The portraits show silk and posture. The ledgers show blood, and ledgers always balance. If you thought history was a fairy tale with bad lighting, think again. Which story rattled you most, and which one do you think the court historians cleaned up?